Across the blood-soaked landscapes of the medieval world, an army marched, not for survival, but for salvation. Cloaked in crosses and driven by divine fury, the Crusades unleashed not just war, but devastation that scorched continents and souls alike. This was no passing campaign, it was a seismic convulsion of faith, power, and vengeance that reshaped empires and erased entire populations. Beneath the banners of Christ, mercy withered, and atrocity took root. What followed was not merely conquest, it was judgment wrought by human hands. The siege of Jerusalem, no mercy for civilians. It was July 1099. After a brutal, months-long campaign across the Levant, the Crusader army, weathered, starved, and inflamed by a sense of divine mission, reached the gates of Jerusalem. The city, held by the Fatimid Caliphate at the time, stood as both a symbol and a prize. For many Crusaders, it was the culmination of a sacred vow sworn years earlier in faraway Europe. But what followed was not a triumph of faith, it was a catastrophe of humanity. The siege lasted less than 2 weeks. By July 15th, the Crusaders had breached the city's defenses. According to the chronicler Raymond of Aguilers, the knights entered with chants of Deus Vult, God wills it, echoing through blood-soaked streets. Inside, panic reigned. Defenders and civilians alike sought refuge in sacred spaces, but the storm showed no mercy. The Al-Aqsa Mosque became a final redoubt for many, yet the massacre continued even there. Raymond described the scene with unflinching fervor. In the Temple of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. The account is supported, though not without variations, by other chroniclers like Fulcher of Chartres and William of Tyre. Muslim, Jewish, and Eastern Christian sources paint a similarly harrowing picture. Though the numbers are debated, with estimates ranging widely, the core fact remains indisputable: thousands of non-combatants were killed in what became one of the most infamous moments of the First Crusade. The Crusaders saw this not as cruelty, but as divine justice. Pope Urban II had framed the campaign as a holy purification, and many believed they were agents of that sacred cleansing. But in their zeal, they turned the holy city into a place of desolation. What was taken in the name of God was stained by the actions of men. Massacre at al-Numan, cannibalism in the desert. In the winter of 1098, the Crusader army descended upon the Syrian city of al-Numan. Weakened by hunger, disease, and months of relentless siege warfare, they had already endured unimaginable conditions. But what transpired here would cast one of the darkest shadows over the entire First Crusade, a moment when desperation crossed the line into historical infamy. The city, known then simply as Ma'arat, was well defended and strategically positioned. After several weeks of siege, the Crusaders broke through its fortifications in early December. What followed was a massacre. While the precise number of casualties remains uncertain, contemporary sources agree that a significant portion of the population, combatants and civilians alike, was killed. But it was what occurred after the violence that shocked even some within their own ranks. According to the chronicler Radulf of Cannes, a Norman priest who joined the crusade, the hunger among the Crusaders grew so extreme that our men cooked the bodies of the Saracens and devoured them. The Arab historian Ibn al-Athir echoed this grim accusation, reporting that the Franks boiled adult Muslims in cooking pots and impaled children on spits. These claims, horrifying as they are, appear in multiple sources from both Christian and Muslim perspectives. Modern historians remain cautious. While cannibalism is likely to have occurred among the most desperate crusaders, it was not widespread across the entire army, nor was it officially condoned. Yet even if the scale remains uncertain, the fact itself is rarely disputed. This moment at Ma'arat exposed the collapse of all moral and religious restraint, when starvation drove men who claimed divine purpose into actions that defied all civilized norms. In the words of Fulcher of Chartres, what they did there was beyond all reckoning. Forced conversions and the sword. The Crusades were waged under the banner of holy war, but faith in this context was rarely a matter of personal conviction, it was often dictated by the sword. While many crusaders believed they were liberating sacred lands, their actions frequently veered into religious coercion. Nowhere was this more evident than in the forced conversions that accompanied their military campaigns. Throughout the First Crusade and beyond, non-Christian populations, particularly Muslims and Jews, faced a dire ultimatum in many besieged towns and cities: convert or die. Though not uniformly enforced across all regions or leaders, this approach was documented in several key encounters. After the siege of Jerusalem in 1099, for instance, while many were killed, others were reportedly spared if they agreed to baptism. In some cases, entire communities were compelled to embrace Christianity to preserve their lives and families. One of the most striking accounts comes from the Rhineland massacres of 1096, where Jewish communities were confronted by mobs of crusaders in what was meant to be the prelude to their journey east. Chronicler Solomon Bar Simpson recorded that many Jews were given a single choice: accept baptism or face execution. Though some capitulated under pressure, others chose death over conversion, viewing it as a betrayal of their covenant. Not all Crusader leaders supported these tactics. Figures like Raymond IV of Toulouse and others were known to oppose coerced conversions, citing theological arguments that true faith cannot be forced. The Church itself had long debated the legitimacy of such conversions, often condemning them in theory, but looking away in practice. The result was a legacy of trauma among persecuted communities, many of whom never returned to their homes. What was justified by some as a righteous mission became, for others, a devastating erasure of identity, where belief was not offered, but demanded at the edge of a blade. Looting of Constantinople, Christian versus Christian. In April 1204, the Fourth Crusade reached its catastrophic climax, not in the Holy Land, but in the heart of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople, then the largest and wealthiest Christian city in the world, fell not to Muslim forces, but to the very Crusaders who claimed to defend Christendom. It was a moment of staggering betrayal, Christian turning sword against Christian in pursuit of gold, glory, and power. The original goal of the Fourth Crusade had been Egypt, seen as the strategic key to Jerusalem. But due to mounting debts to the Republic of Venice and a tangled web of Byzantine politics, the Crusader army was diverted. In 1203, they supported the restoration of the deposed Byzantine Emperor Isaac II and his son Alexios. But when internal opposition overthrew Alexios the next year, the Crusaders, unpaid and angry, turned their rage on the city itself. On April 12, 1204, after days of attack, the Crusaders broke through Constantinople's strong walls. What followed was 3 days of uncontrolled stealing and ruin. Valuable relics, icons, and old books were stolen or destroyed. Churches were damaged badly. Even the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral of Eastern Christianity, was robbed. According to the historian Nicetas Choniates, Crusaders defiled the holy altar and broke into the imperial graves searching for gold. This was not simply a robbery, it was a blow from which Byzantium would never fully recover. The Latin Empire was made in its place, but it was weak and did not last long. More lasting was the split between Eastern Orthodox and Western Catholic Christianity, a gap made worse by the actions of those who were meant to bring Christians together. The sack of Constantinople showed the selfish goals that often hid behind the crusading idea. It was not faith that led those days, but greed. Slaughter at Antioch, starvation and cruelty. Before Jerusalem was ever reached, the First Crusade was nearly broken at the walls of Antioch. This old Syrian city, once a key center of early Christianity, became the site of one of the longest and most hopeless sieges in Crusader history. From October 1097 to June 1098, Crusader forces surrounded Antioch, facing not only enemy fightback, but hunger, disease, and internal fighting. The city was held by the Seljuk Turks, led by Yagisayan, who led a strong defense. As the months dragged on, supplies ran very low. Horses were eaten. Leather was boiled. Dead bodies lay exposed outside the walls. The Crusaders' spirit weakened, and runaways rose. Writer Fulcher of Chartres told the pain simply, the hunger was so bad that many boiled grass, leaves, and animal skins to stay alive. When the city was finally given up from inside in June 1098, the Crusaders rushed through the gates in a rage caused by 8 months of suffering. The capture of Antioch caused a wave of killing. Many of the city's people, both fighters and normal people, were killed in the chaos. Even though the crusade had religious meaning, the rules of Christian kindness and forgiveness were often forgotten in the heat of revenge. Antioch was a testing place, a place where faith and pain came together, and where living meant losing mercy. The Crusades showed the dangerous point where faith meets force. Cities fell, innocent people died, and the dreams of holiness were often lost in war. Their memory changed East and West both, and still stays in history and stories. Comment below, can a holy reason ever explain such worldly damage? As the Byzantine historian Nicetas Choniates wrote, even the Saracens are kind compared with these men who carry the cross of Christ.